Anthropic, the people behind Claude AI, just published a report that the AI hype machine does not want you to read carefully, because buried inside that report is a number that reframes everything, and most leaders I speak to are drawing completely the wrong conclusion from it. And here's that number. AI can theoretically handle 94% of tasks in knowledge-based roles: engineering, computer science, finance, legal, management, administration, 94%. And yet right now, in the real world, it's actually being used for only 33% of those tasks. That is not a rounding error. That is a chasm the size of the Grand Canyon. Now, most people look at that gap and see one of two things. Either they see panic, AI is coming and we're already behind, or they see relief, see it as oh, well, it's all overhyped and we've got time. And in my experience, both of those responses will cost you. My name is Konstantin. I founded 3 companies, had 2 exits, and spent the last 2 decades rebuilding hiring and leadership systems for some of the best known organizations in the world. I've even founded an AI business called Claretta, which in just 6 months has been rolled out across nearly 100 organizations, including startups, scale-ups, private equity fund portfolios, and one of Germany's largest banks. I've watched technology reshape the way we work more than once. And the leaders who got it wrong were actually not the ones who moved too slowly or too fast. They were the ones who misread what the data was actually telling them. And that's the point of this video. I want to read this data properly, because what it actually tells us about leadership, about hiring, and about how you build a team that is ready for what is coming is far more nuanced and far more actionable than anything the headlines are giving you. So let's get into it. So let's start with what Anthropic actually found, because the headlines here have been, well, a little bit lazy. The report introduces something they call observed exposure. It's basically a metric that combines what AI could theoretically do across different job types with what it is actually being used for in real professional settings, in the real world, measured from real Claude usage data. Not surveys, not predictions, actual usage data. And when you map those two things together and you map them against each other, you get this chart. Now, the massive blue area is showing us the theoretical capability, and a much smaller area, the red one, is showing us the reality. In legal roles, AI could theoretically handle close to 90% of tasks. It's currently doing around 20% of them. In management and leadership roles, the gap is just as stark. Now, Anthropic's own reading of that chart is obviously optimistic. Their position is essentially, look at all the blue space, that's the future, the red will grow to fill it as capabilities improve and adoption deepens. And that may be true, but there is another way to read that chart entirely, and it's that reading I think matters more for the decisions you need to make right now as a leader. Stay with me here, because this is where most of the commentary on this report stops, and it's exactly where it should start. The official explanation for that gap is technical: legal constraints, integration challenges, the need for human oversight, organizations that haven't modernized their data infrastructure yet. All of that is real. All of that is true, but having spent the last 6 months deploying AI tools inside nearly 100 organizations, I can also tell you there is a deeper reason that the report doesn't fully capture, and it has nothing to do with technology. The gap exists because most organizations are not structured to use AI effectively. Not technically, not operationally, but organizationally. The bottleneck isn't the tool, it's the leadership layer above it. Think about what effective AI deployment actually requires. You need clarity on what outcomes you are trying to achieve. You need processes that are documented and consistent enough to hand off to a system. You need people who are skilled enough to evaluate AI output critically rather than just accept it. And you need a culture where people are willing to change how they work, which basically requires exactly the kind of psychological safety and trust we talked about in the last video. Now, most organizations have none of those things fully in place, and no amount of AI capability closes that gap for you. And here's the part that nobody in the AI industry wants to say out loud. That gap may not close the way everyone is predicting. Let me explain why. Anthropic's own interpretation of their own data is essentially the red will grow to fill the blue. Adoption will deepen, capabilities will improve, and eventually AI will take over the world and will do what it is theoretically that it can do. But look at that chart again with fresh eyes. In computer and mathematical roles, the most AI native, most technically sophisticated roles in any organization, AI is theoretically capable of 94% of tasks, and it is actually doing only 33% of those tasks. These are the people who are the most comfortable with technology, most incentivized to use it, and working in the domain where AI performs best. And the gap is still 61 percentage points. If the most favorable conditions for AI adoption produce a 61-point gap, what does that tell you about every other part of your business? My read here is this. Some of the gap will indeed close as the technology improves and organizations adapt. But a significant portion of it reflects something more structural. The irreducible human complexity of real work in real organizations with real people, competing priorities, ambiguous information, and decisions that require judgment no model has yet been able to fully replicate. Now, that is not a pessimistic take on AI. I am building an AI business. I believe deeply in what this technology can do. But I think the leaders who will navigate this most successfully are the ones who are honest about what AI will and won't replace, rather than the ones who are either running towards it blindly or away from it fearfully. So if that's the reality, what does it actually mean for how you lead? Well, the first thing here is that it means your job is not going away anytime soon, but it is changing fundamentally. The Anthropic data shows us that AI adoption is highest in roles involving routine knowledge tasks, documentation, data processing, and structured analysis. The roles showing the lowest observed exposure are the ones requiring judgment, relationships, context, and trust. And that is exactly the domain of leadership. What this means in practice is that the leaders who will thrive are the ones who double down on the things AI cannot do. Building genuine psychological safety, making judgment calls with incomplete information, creating the team identity and culture that makes people want to show up and give their best, and knowing how to ask the right questions rather than just process the right answers. The leaders who will struggle are the ones who mistake activity for leadership, who are still doing work their team or their tools should be doing, who haven't made that shift from operator to multiplier. Sound familiar? And this changes hiring in a very specific way. The Anthropic report flags something that I think should be ringing alarm bells for every hiring manager right now. Young workers between ages 22 and 25 are already showing a 14% drop in entry rates into AI-exposed roles compared to 2022 levels. Basically, that means the pipeline of talent into those knowledge roles is mostly affected by AI, and it's already starting to shift. Now, what that means for your hiring is this. The competencies that mattered 5 years ago are not the same ones that matter now. You are no longer just hiring for what someone knows or what they can do. You are hiring for how quickly they learn, how well they work alongside AI tools, how good their judgment is when the AI gives them an answer and they have to decide whether to trust it, and whether they have the critical thinking to know when the tool is wrong. Because as we all know, AI is convinced it is right, even if it is wrong. Now, most hiring processes are not built to assess any of those things. Most interview questions are still designed for a world that is already changing underneath our feet. So let me bring all of this together for you. The Anthropic report is important, but the conclusion most leaders are drawing from it is too simple. It is not a story about AI taking over the world. It is also not a story about AI being overhyped. It's actually a story about organizational readiness and the gap between what is theoretically possible and what is actually happening. It's a mirror that is being held up to the leadership and structural maturity of most organizations. The leaders who read it that way and act accordingly will be in a very different position in 3 years than the ones who either panic or shrug it off. And there's three things worth taking away from all this. First, the bottleneck in your AI adoption is almost certainly not the technology. It is actually your organizational structure and your leadership culture. Secondly, the skills that will matter most going forward are exactly the ones AI cannot replicate: judgment, trust, culture, and the ability to ask better questions. And third, your hiring process needs to catch up with the world you are actually hiring into the context that you're hiring into, not the context that existed 5 years ago. If this kind of thinking is useful to you, subscribe to the channel. This is what I put out every week, data-backed, experience-grounded, and built for leaders who want to think more clearly about where this is all going. And if you want to know more about why most managers don't become leaders, check out my next video, linked here. See you there.